No mitzvah in the entire Torah is associated with more esotericism and mysticism than the mitzvah of the Parah Aduma, the red heifer. Completely clouded in mystery, the Parah Aduma and its unique set of laws became the absolute paradigm of laws unapproachable by human logic, and who can blame us for labeling it that? If the singular greatest mind in world history, Shlomo Melech, in Koheles Zayin Chaf Gimel declared that he couldn't understand it, who are we to even attempt to comprehend it? So by and large, people just gloss over the words of the Parah Aduma's peculiar procedure and then move on, and are content that they have satisfied all their intellectual obligations to glean meaning from this topic that our human mind simply can't understand. And yet, with even a rudimentary glance at the Mefarshim's writings on this mitzvah, you realize that this approach is wrong. True, the Torah labels the mitzvah of the Parah Aduma as a chayk, a decree from Hashem that is inexplicable to the human mind. But that, as many commentators note, is merely referring to the paradox the Parah Aduma contains, and the fact that the kohen charged with preparing and sprinkling the concoction becomes impure, while the individual sprinkled with it becomes pure. But the actual ritual itself, however, is rich with meaning for us, and the inspiration is as relevant today as it ever was. So here's an idea. A dead corpse conveys impurity, tumah, and anyone who touches it needs to be purified by the Parah Aduma. The process of its preparation consists of burning an entire red heifer in a fire, into which is added a cedar branch, hyssop, and crimson-dyed wool. The remaining ashes are then mixed with spring water and sprinkled on top of the impure individual. These materials, says Reb Hirsch, are not random ingredients in some sort of esoteric potion that magically fights impurity coming out of a corpse. These are very specific symbolic items used to spiritually inspire a man needing the inspiration. A dead body, explains Reb Hirsch, is the antithesis of a Jew on earth. It represents brute physicality and earthliness. A corpse is everything the neshama is not. It's stagnant, it's mundane, it's 100% materialistic. So, as a means of protecting our souls from becoming intoxicated by worldly, earthly, unholy pursuits, Hashem placed several safeguards, sort of spiritual caution tape in our lives to ensure that we are focused on our soul and not on our body. One of those safeguards is avoiding contact with a dead body, which is the paradigm of mundanity. A corpse doesn't have inherent radioactive toxins that are emitted the moment it dies. Rather, Hashem places safeguards around a dead body to prevent us from coming too close to something that screams out brute physicality. Our souls are what we're centrally focused on, and Hashem wants us to keep it that way. So therefore, one who did touch a dead body, who perhaps got a little too close to death, the very symbol of yesterday, of decay, of stagnancy, needs a special concoction of symbolic items that will inspire him to remain fresh and vibrant and holy. The cedar, one of the tallest of trees, serves to remind the man of the need to grow ever higher, using confidence and strength to spiritually forge forth in a largely unspiritual world. The hyssop, on the other hand, a lowly plant, inspires the need to be humble and focus on becoming a more caring, loving, compassionate, divinely oriented person. We take wool from the strong ram and color it with crimson dye, which is excreted by a weak worm to represent the mastery man should have over the entire gamut of the physical world, from the strong to the weak. We take all these elements, big, tall, strong, and weak, and we reduce them to ashes, inspiring the man to reach higher in a world where it's so easy to remain low. And finally, we mix these ashes with fresh spring water. Water as in the elixir of life, water as in the symbol of life itself. We take the dichotomy of ashes and water, stagnation and growth, life and death, yesterday and tomorrow, and we sprinkle it on the man to drive home the idea that both elements are needed to live in this world as a spiritual Jew. We need the power of our historical yesterday infused with the vibrancy and energy of the incoming tomorrow. We as Jews abhor pure physicality and death. But we don't negate all of the wisdom and the meaning that those deceased people stood for. We take the meaning out of their deaths and infuse it into our future. The Medrash Tanchuma on Parshas Chukas Perek Ches writes that every single batch of the paraduma concoction had mixed inside of it ashes from Moshe Rabbeinu's original paraduma, because that is precisely the point. We use fresh water to remind the contaminated person to refocus on spiritual vibrancy and growth, and yet we mix it with ancient ashes to ensure that we never forget our past and the rich meaning that it gave us. Jews have been performing this balancing act for the duration of our existence. We live in the present with an eye on the future, with an eye on tomorrow, and still focus on our rich and meaningful past, using it as a springboard for our physical and spiritual growth. For example, on the one hand, no country in the world has more museums per capita than Eretz Yisrael, because we're focused on our past. On the other hand, no country in the world, aside from one, has more new books written, because we are writing for the future. On the one hand, Israel leads the world in medical patents. On the other hand, Israel has one of the highest numbers of registered tour guides of any country in the world. On the one hand, Eretz Yisrael has the city of Yaffo, the oldest port in the world, as well as the city of Yericho, the oldest continuously inhabited place on earth. And on the other hand, Israel boasts some of the world's fastest growing cities, such as Kiryat Sefer. On the one hand, there are more Jews studying ancient religious wisdom in its original text than any other religion in the world. On the other hand, Jewish-owned companies comprise the third highest representation on Wall Street, behind only the USA and China. On the one hand, Jews are forever visiting the Kaiso, Kever Rachel, and Mars Machpelah. On the other hand, Israel is the only country in the entire world to have entered the 21st century in a net gain in the number of trees. On the one hand, our society cherishes the wisdom of the old and the learned. On the other hand, Eretz Yisrael is the only westernized country in the world that has a yearly statistic of more births than deaths, because we are intensely attached to our past while being vigorously focused on our future. And this dichotomy is interestingly expressed in the laws of kosher meat. The two symbols of a kosher animal are famously its split hooves and its chewing of its cud. Lacking one of these elements, the animal remains not kosher. Did you ever wonder why these features, out of all the animal features, these features were chosen to be the line of demarcation between kosher and treif? Why? What is symbolic to those features? So Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein explains that these features represent two aspects of life that Hashem very much wants us to focus on. Chewing cud represents yesterday, history, review. An animal is re-eating a meal it already ate. A split hoof, on the other hand, represents forwardness, climbing, going. The animal with the most split hoof is the mountain goat. It's also the animal capable of climbing higher than virtually any other animal on earth. The Torah explains, Zilberstein is telling us that not only must we have split hooves and be forward thinking, we must forever chew our cud, remembering our past, our history, and our ancestors. Only an animal that represents both is fit for Jewish consumption. Conversely, the animal that most symbolizes Christianity is the pig. Think bacon and pork. It is the only animal in the entire animal kingdom that has split hooves but does not chew its cud. And likewise, Christians are very progressive and full of reform and reconstruction and are more interested in tearing down history than propping it up. The Muslims, on the other hand, are best symbolized by the camel, the animal that they most use in the hot desert climate that they call home. The camel chews its cud but does not have split hooves. And likewise, the Muslims are intensely focused on their history, with tight-knit tribes run with an iron fist by the elders of the home, and naturally they express extreme caution with embracing virtually any form of modernity. But the Jews have an infusion of both. We have a rich history that impacts virtually every part of our lives, along with a strong passion and desire to constantly grow and adapt and spring higher. This dichotomy is the greatest balancing act our nation performs. We spend our days poring over ancient books written thousands of years ago, and at the same time spend our days coming up with new and fresh interpretations. We tell our children immensely detailed stories of events that took place 3,000 years ago, yet we have conventions and meetings to discover new and innovative ways to teach students. It's the only way our glorious heritage and Messiah lives on, with a grasp on the past and an eye on the future. In early 1948, Leon Frankel, Harold Livingston, George Lichter, and Coleman Goldstein were finally enjoying themselves and their life after serving the American Air Force as pilots, flying fighter planes during the war, and happy the war was over. They were more than ready to start their families and finally live peaceful lives. And one day, out of the blue, an old friend of theirs, Stephen Schwartz, he calls them up and he left them all a message. He said, get to the Henry Hudson Hotel in Manhattan and get there fast. The survival of the Jewish people is at stake. Now, knowing that the Holocaust was over, the 4 ex-fighter pilots were confused. Nevertheless, they rushed to the hotel to hear Schwartz out. So, sipping a glass of vodka, Steve Schwartz looks at these 4 young pilots and says, listen here. Hundreds of thousands of Jews are about to pour into Palestine right now, and almost all of them are completely unaware that the 5 neighboring Arab countries are planning on invading and slaughtering every single one of them. Egypt declared that we will do what Hitler did, only worse. And Steve put down his glass and he looked at the 4 young 20-year-olds. The Jews have absolutely no way of defending themselves. We found 4 German airplanes that were abandoned in a field in Czechoslovakia. The Jewish people need you to fly them. And the 4 boys looked at each other. They had finally begun living a peaceful life, and now they're being asked to climb back into the seat of a fighter plane, and of all planes, old German planes? And Steve Schwartz looked at them with a fire in his eyes and said, millions of Jewish people in the Holocaust lost everything they had. You 4 have the opportunity to at least give them a future. So the 4 looked at Steve and said, okay, we're in. So the 4 traveled east and secretly declared themselves the Jewish people's temporary air force, an air force consisting of 4 people, not 4,000, not 404, not 40, 4 people, possibly the smallest air force of all time, and certainly the most frightened air force of all time. On May 29th, 1948, the immense Egyptian army was 20 miles out of Tel Aviv. Leon Frankel approached Harold and told him, listen, if one of us doesn't go up and bomb them right now, they will be here tomorrow and there will be a bloodbath. Okay, Harold said, I'll go. So he lifts up the used German plane to the sky, and Harold looked down and could see scores of fresh Jewish immigrants on the ground below, hoping and praying that they could finally start their lives anew. And he nervously looked up ahead and saw the massive Egyptian army. He quietly flew his plane until he was moments away from being directly on top of them, on top of their gunmen, on top of their artillery, on top of thousands of soldiers who might shoot him down, and he tilted his plane entirely on its side to get the most direct angle to stop the bombs. He closed his eyes and he screamed, Shema Yisrael, and he let the bombs fall, and fall they did. And in a sheer miracle sent straight from heaven, the Egyptian army was left in shambles, and Harold flew back completely unscathed, and the oncoming Egyptian onslaught was ground to a halt. The war was won, and the potential barbaric slaughter of thousands of Jews was avoided. And years later, when he sat down with an interviewer, Harold was asked what he was thinking as he was flying towards the Egyptian army. He said, I looked up to heaven and said, Hashem, those Arabs down there might want to win. We Jews need to win. Those Arabs might want to come out victorious. We need to come out victorious. Those Arabs might want to claim this land. We need to claim this land. Our past is too glorious. Our future is too bright. Hashem, save us so the memory of the 6 million can live on. Hashem, save your precious nation so we can continue to make you proud. We, as Jews, look to our glorious past for spiritual energy to propel us into the future. We rid ourselves of the stagnancy of death by ensuring that we are forever drinking from the fresh springs of life with youthfulness and zest. We take our ancient traditions and use them to light up the world. We look to the past. We look to the future. We cling to our Messiah and let it guide us down the road of life today, tomorrow, and forever.